powerful than a locomotive. Able to leap tall buildings at a single bound. Look, up in the sky, it's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's super.
Bird chimp.
Yes, it's super.
Chimp.
Strange visitor from another planet who came to Earth with powers and ability. Man who can change the course of mighty rivers, bend steel in his bare hands, and who, disguised as Clark Kent, mild-mannered reporter for a great metropolitan newspaper, fights a never-ending battle for truth, justice, and the American way.
Super chimp. Super chimp. Super chimp.
So, hello everybody. Welcome to Whining On. We're here for the second Whining On of this week, and today we have Johnny Macaulay. How you doing, Johnny?
Doing all right. How are you doing?
Good to see you, buddy. So, you at the moment in a flat? Are you in a? It doesn't look like. Is it a shed? What are you in at the moment?
Yeah. Well, it's a barge that sort of sometimes fluctuates between barge and skip. As I was explaining to Matt earlier on in December, I don't know. I lost my mind and I bought a project, a cheap boat, and I've been sort of wondering what the hell I was thinking. So anyway, as Matt's got boating experience and anyone else out there that's living in a barge and you're doing it up, it's basically a game of Tetris where you sort of shift all your gear from one part to repair it, and then you live in a complete shithole until it has been repaired, and then you shift all the stuff back again. So there you go.
You live in one bit of your boat at a time as stuff becomes working in storage.
Lovely 1970s curtains here. I don't think they've been washed since the 70s.
They've just developed character since then. So,
Yeah.
Talking about things that have developed character since the 70s, what was your young life like then, buddy?
Well, I was born in the late 60s, 67. So going to school in the 70s was quite a bit different, than I imagine it is just now. It's a very sort of much corporal punishment was sort of distributed quite liberally. Either the belt on the hand or a slap in the ear. So as I was also saying to Matt earlier on, that some of the schools I went to, they weren't rough, but it just seemed like they were an institution for bullying. There was always someone from the top down giving a slap. Headmaster to the teacher, to the teachers to the kids, and from the kids to the smaller kids, just slap.
And do you think that was understood? Was that something accepted, that there was this kind of chain of violence? Obviously, they wouldn't term it like that, but what you just described.
I think it was just the norm. I haven't seen kids being slapped in the same way as when I was a child, and I don't mean that in a sort of back in my day sort of thing. But I've never raised my hands to my kids. I just thought there's got to be a better way to this, because obviously they're going to grow up, and if that's the way that they are educated, then they're not thinking of it another way of dealing with their conflicts. In fact, last week, I was on a bus. I was rushing off to work because I'm working as a masseur at the moment, and it was pissing with rain, really heavy rain, and all the tubes and all the trains were disrupted, which meant I couldn't actually make my appointment. So I leave the tube, I get on a bus, and at the bus stop, there's 3 kids there, really sort of grubby kids, like 14 years old, and they asked me how to get to Hammersmith, and I said, well, read the timetable. They said, we can't read. And I go, oh. They're like 14 and they can't read. So they got on the bus. Anyway, they're really young, and they've got a kid and a baby in a pram. And the pram is filthy. The kid is filthy. In fact, they're all filthy, and they're giving shit to everybody on the bus. And oh man, these people are a nightmare. And to the point that this 14-year-old kid was starting to bully an old lady, and I eventually had enough, and I told him to cut it out. And he started to square up to me. And just before things got a bit too heated, the bus came to a stop. The pram went over. This grubby baby flew through the air, out of the pram, and splattered on the floor. It was a total mess. And afterwards, I just, I thought, these kids are like the kids from the 70s. It's just, there's so much neglect going here. They look like they come from the latest generation in a line of people who neglect their kids. So,
but it's a chain of neglect, and I think
it is a chain of neglect, and
so much society's neglected them, and there has to be this long chain of people just not supporting each other.
Yeah. So back to the question about with my kids, I don't want them to. I'd rather they sort of thought their way out of a situation rather than had to slap their way to communicate. And unfortunately, these three kids that were on the bus, I think, they're in a bit of a dead end. How do you get out of that? Escape that chain as you're describing it?
It's very difficult to escape what, to give it a lofty term, would be one's paradigm, and that's a paradigm that they're in, the way they view the world, the way they see other people, the threat, fairness, everything. It all fits within a worldview that needs to shift for better things to come, I think. Who knows? So, Johnny, will you feel like you were not someone that approved of what went on at the time in the schooling system? You said it was a place of bullying. So
you just go on. Do you know what I mean? When you're growing up and you're in a sort of rougher neighborhood, it's all flight and fight sort of stuff. So some of the scraps I won, some of the scraps I didn't, but it didn't stop us from going out and.
And what did you do as a young man? What were your interests?
As a kid?
Yeah.
Well, the kids would just sort of. We spent a lot of time on the street, or we'd go fishing in the burn, with like nets and stuff like this. Very outdoor stuff, because it just seemed that all of our parents were saying, "Get the hell out of the house and out from under my feet. It's a good day," And back in the 70s, TV was rubbish. Do you know what I mean? There was only like 5 minutes of TV that a kid was interested in, because it was rubbish.
You didn't see all the things we love now, like Bagpuss and the Herb Garden and stuff.
Yeah. But I mean, kids' TV, it lasted from like 4:30 till 5 o'clock, and then it was the news, and then it was all sort of boring adult programs. And there was only 3 TV shows, 3 TV channels anyway: BBC One, BBC Two, and ITV. And then on a Sunday, oh my God. You got one cartoon, and then you get 5 hours of horse racing.
And if you're lucky, you get some songs of praise at the end of it.
Then songs of praise, and you're just like, oh, man, we're going to go back to school, and already Sunday is crap.
So you went for adventures, right? You were a young kid playing about in the parks and stuff.
Yeah.
But did you have an artistic or performing kind of thread going through your life at this point?
No, not really. But I remember picking up a lump of wood on my way to primary school. I might have been 5 or 6, and already imagining it was a shield. And because I think it must have been like the back of a chair or something. And the teacher said, "Well, why don't you paint it?" So she gave me some watercolors, and I painted it. So how I imagined a Roman shield to look. Or, we would model stuff out of dough, and then put it into the oven, and it would harden. But I already remember having this image of a sculpture I was going to make from this dough. I must have been only 5 or 6, but the details in the imagination were really, really specific. It was like a Scottish piper with bagpipes and all this sort of stuff. Totally impossible for a kid to realize. So I explained this to my mum, when I got home, hoping that she would like provide me with the materials that the teacher did. No, but instead of just like, go wash your hands, get ready for dinner, and that was it. as far as being able to develop ideas, I think I was quite imaginative as a kid, and I remember some of the games, that I'd play and actually put myself within this sort of movie that you have in your own head as to how you see yourself within that story.
So when you say games, you mean kind of like make believe?
Yeah. No, it's total make believe as you sort of reenact maybe a scene you've watched on a TV show, and you reenact the character.
And you took a lot of joy from doing this. It was something.
Yeah. I mean, during the 70s, there was that TV show with Caradine, Kung Fu.
Yeah.
And all the kids were going crazy for it and drop kicking each other. In fact, I lost my first tooth playing Kung Fu as someone drop kicked me in the face while I was eating a sandwich, and I was going, oh, something hard on the sandwich. I hadn't actually realized he kicked one of my teeth out.
I'm sure you were just one of the many injuries that were caused by people trying to emulate that program.
Oh, no, definitely. I've even got the haircuts,
You didn't have a completely your choice on that one, though, eh?
No, you got it right, you'll have to carry the burning hot cauldron to leave the monastery, Glasshopper.
So when you got to high school, did you go into theatre school? Did you go to theatre classes? Did you go?
No, not at all. No. I think I was in a school pantomime when I was a kid, but it was something to do. But it didn't fill me with that desire to keep on doing it. It was just yet another thing that kids will try as an after-school club.
Yeah.
I didn't get into performing until my early 20s.
So what did you do when you were in your teens then? Were you in bands, or were you just mucking about and having fun?
Just mucking about, really. When I was in my teens, I had no idea what I wanted to do, apart from getting pissed at the weekends and trying to snog girls, just teen stuff. As far as having ambitions, I had no real idea. I played rugby, and apart from just trying to go on at school, play games at the weekend, I had no idea. And during the 80s, I was living in Greenock, which is on the Clyde. The local shipbuilders all get closed during the mid 80s, so it was desperate times. It was really dark and dingy, and there's all these people that were just being made unemployed, like thousands of people. Because there was a point where these places employed so many workers, all went in the same overalls and the same workers' bonnets, and then you'd come all out at the same time, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're all unemployed. So a general air of misery was quite overwhelming, and it really gave me a chip on my shoulder against the privilege of the Southeast. Harry Enfield's loads of money character. It really summed up pretty well for the rest of the country, which is, we're getting shat upon by Westminster. And so when I was at school, I don't think I was super academic. I just worked hard because, people were saying, well, you've got to study and you got more a chance of getting a job that isn't related to these industries. So I think my grades were pretty average, B's and maybe the occasional A. But I worked at it.
Did the detooling of industry in the north and all the stuff that happened then, which even in the late 80s, early 90s, was still impacting on me in the North Midlands, did that have an effect on your worldview and on the way you wanted to go going forward? Did it
well, to tell you the truth, I mean, Scotland, it can be quite provincial in its attitude sometimes. Do you know what I mean? If you get if you want to wear, express yourself through fancy clothes and color your hair and stuff, there's, well, it might be different now, but back in the 80s, there was always someone there to bring you down. Who the fuck do you think you are to dress like that? So I couldn't wait to get away from Scotland. As soon as I could, I was, I went traveling. I managed.
Did you have any idea of where you wanted to go, or did you just
I
leave?
know. The thing was, my family went on one foreign holiday when I was 10 years old, and we went to France for a week or a fortnight camping or something like this, and it was quite incredible at the time because back in the 70s, the various different European countries had their own their car manufacturers, for example. So I guess all the French drove Citroens and Renaults, and the British had Leylands and Bedfords and Fords, and the Germans would have driven Volkswagen.
Volkswagen, yeah.
Yeah, it's only afterwards that these nations started buying cars that weren't homemade, So I was really impressed. I was really fascinated, by everything in France. Everything they had. Oh, they were driving different cars, and
it was
and
a
sort of
different. It's homogenized.
Yeah, and they were like speaking different language, and I'd in the campsite they had a bar or something with a TV on it, and I'd watch the TV for an hour because kids they watch anything on a TV. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't matter if it's in a different language, and try and figure out what they were saying. Following the story, but going, all right, more or less I understand what's going on, and yeah, and also the weather. You just go, you get a week, 2 weeks in the sunshine, and I was just mixing with all these other kids from Belgium and in Germany and Spain, and just going, oh wow, we're all speaking different languages, but we're actually managing to play the same games, and that fascination for Europe has never left me. I consider myself a European. I'm Scottish by birth, but I'm a European because I feel like a great connection with all these other people, and then subsequently later on, I spent so many years on the continent, and so I never really saw myself as British, Union Jack British. I happened to be born here, but spiritually and culturally, I've got a lot more in common with people in Italy, for example, than I've got here, in a certain sense.
Yeah, I could understand that, having travelled and seen the cultures in Europe and seen the culture here, particularly within our industry, cabaret and performance art. There's very much a European appreciation for performance that British people don't have. I don't know if you'd agree with that.
No, most definitely. I mean, the best festivals I've seen for the art are in France, and because I guess because of their funding, but you get to see high levels of ability and technique, and also just artistically things that don't follow the same narrative. So even their cabaret over there, the things I've seen have been really high class and thematically more complex than what you see in the cabaret in Britain, which pretty much is pandering to a drunk audience. So when I started doing cabaret in London, I ended up doing things like the climbing balloon or costume change, because these are things that you don't have to watch it intently to understand what the finale is. It's just, it's a bit like a mobile hanging above the bed of an infant. Oh, big shapes and colors. So yeah, whenever I had the opportunity to go to see these festivals on the continent, I've always come away with something.
So your first travelling away from Scotland, do you have any knowledge of any of this at this point? Do you know about the world of European performance festivals, of all the kind of things you would later plug into?
No, not at all. Basically, we had this one foreign holiday, and then after that, every holiday was in Scotland, because money was tight, and but we'd go to an island off of Scotland, which is very sort of rugged, Isle of Arran, in a caravan, like 5 of us in this tiny little caravan. After that, the next time I went abroad was a student exchange program. The friend of my mum said, "Oh, you're going to be finishing school, and there's, you can work in the States in like a holiday camp for kids. All you have to do is sort of look after them and for the summer."
Well, how old were you at this point again? Sorry,
18, 17 or 18.
And so there was some thought of performance before this then. If that was something that was suggested to you as something you could do, then the idea of performing must have been percolating around somewhere, surely.
No, not at all. As I said, I didn't really consider it until my 20s. And that was purely by accident. Because up to that point, I had been in London 18. So I started hitchhiking around Europe for about 3 years after I left school. And I'd come back to London occasionally, and I'd stay in a squat in Vauxhall. But the people that were squatting down, they were all Australians and Kiwis. I'd come into Covent Garden now and then, and I was busking. I bought a cheap saxophone, learned a couple of tunes, and I'd come into Leicester Square and start busking. And I was pretty awful. A friend of mine said, the only reason they're throwing money at you is because there's no stones.
They're hoping maybe if they throw enough, you might stop.
Yeah. So, I was busking. I was making some money.
What was the vibe like there at that time?
Well, the thing was, I didn't really, what you mean, like in relative to Covent Garden and stuff like that?
Well, I just mean like you're a young man, you take your sax there. What do you see around you when you go to Leicester Square at that time? And then this is early 80s, right?
No, this would be like 87.
87. So what's the scene like there then?
Leicester Square is pretty much what Leicester Square is like just now, just jam-packed. And so I couldn't, being the main piazza of Leicester Square wasn't for me. I had to go to one of the sort of the streets that leads off, maybe the street that leads to Piccadilly, and find a doorway to play in. But I remember there was this, I think he might have been Australian. He was either Australian or American busker, and he would turn up with a guitar and an amp. And he basically just blasted the fuck out of everybody else, all the other buskers. I was fuming. I
heard there was incredibly loud amps there at that time.
Oh my god! I think it was it. The saxophone's no quiet instrument. I couldn't hear myself play for this fucker. And that was I think that was probably the first time I came across someone who'd actually done a street show with all of this gear, rather than just rock up with an acoustic instrument.
What did you think at that time? Did you think he was an asshole or a professional, or?
I thought he was an arsehole because he was so loud, but also maybe I was a bit envious that he was a bit more advanced than he had. He knew how to put on this scenario, no? And then subsequently, you had that influx of Ecuadorian Indians, with the flute bands.
Yeah, I had a friend who called them the magic carpets because he said he saw them appear everywhere. They were.
Oh yeah. No, in the late 80s they were everywhere, but they came over and they were like bands of 10, and then those bands themselves would split into bands of 3. I don't know where they are now. And then they'd go from like being either Peruvian or Ecuadorian bands, and then they just like start changing the costume into plains Indians and stuff like this. So.
Gimmick.
Yeah. So at the late 80s, they were everywhere. They were like mushrooms, as you said. And you go to Berlin and they're there as well. You go to Amsterdam, they're there as well. I don't know how many came over. I don't know what happened to them subsequently, whether they got chased.
Well, during the start of my
for-
career, there was still a load around, a few, in like Kingston, you'd see them in Edinburgh, there'd be a load, I saw some in Venice. So they were still about, but I don't think they weren't as prolific. I think the fad was CDs, selling the CDs. I think it ebbed away a little bit. I heard apparently there was something to do with the government in Ecuador or Peru was actually doing a funding scheme to help, because so much money was coming back into the country doing it, that they would loan you. They'd say, we'll give you the money to get the gear to go and do this.
Right.
And maybe funding went out. Who knows?
A bit further along the line, in 2000, I was in a squat in Lugano, south of Switzerland, which got busted by the police. And there must have been 25 Ecuadorians staying in this squat, but real squalor, because part of the squat was like an unfinished building, just a brick. Yeah, like a building site with no windows and stuff, and they were in there basically sort of camping under this half-built building. And then the cops swept down and then deported all of them. Yeah, I guess maybe that was it. Maybe you don't see them because they were so ubiquitous that people just get fed up of hearing it or contributing to it, or maybe there was a loophole where the European countries just said, right, okay.
You don't know if it's something from source, you know, people start buying, but there very definitely there isn't nowhere near as many as there was. But perhaps the same thing will happen with I think, my generation's version of that, which was the floating Yoda statues. They kind of spread all across Europe. In all the big cities, you'd see floating Yodas, floating, Darth Vaders, the costumes with the floating illusion.
Yeah. Have you already discussed this? About the Romanian business element to the statues?
Well, I've wrote an article about it, which you can get on burlesque.co. If you search for Trafalgar Square statues, burlesque.co, I think you'll find it. Romany statues, maybe you'll find it. Search that as well.
Yeah, because maybe 7 years ago down on the South Bank before the licensing, you'd see these heavies turn up and basically take their cut from the young guys that were actually being the statues. So as far as I understood it, the reason that South Bank changed their laws as to people wearing store-bought performers wearing store-bought costumes and masks was to try and eliminate, or at least limit, these Romanian statues or guys dressed as Mickey Mouse and stuff like this, because also not only because they were I don't know, unlicensed, or they didn't have the right passports, whatever, but also because of these heavies, these big burly blokes that would come down and menace them for the money. And it's a real pity with those floating statues, because I remember seeing it for the first time and going, wow, that's incredible.
Great illusion.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing illusion. And then when you see them, in a row down in Trafalgar Square, and that they're not even on. They've gone for a coffee break, and the structure or the gimmick or whatever is just standing there with the Darth Vader's cloak draped over it. Is so crap. It's man, what a waste of an illusion.
Well, I think it's interesting circumstances, the reason why that's come up, and I talk about in the article the potential route forward and what I believe it is and why it is and what I think's right about it. But I don't want to get too drawn by that, because you've got a lot of story to tell, and we don't have to talk about that story now. Let's talk about your story.
Right.
So you get into doing street performance. You start by playing sax, right?
Yeah, I was playing sax, but I was teaching myself. I didn't really do lessons, and I wasn't playing with other musicians, so therefore my progress in it was pretty limited to just learning tunes by rote. Really, I couldn't jam with anybody else. So at some point, I decided to go back to Edinburgh and study photography. And It was just something. I'd say like one of those student exchange programs. There was a photographer there, and I just gave it a go. Bought myself a cheap camera, and then started getting really into it, and started going to the library and looking at art books and photography books, and going, oh yeah, I quite like doing this. So it was just a period of just trying this and trying that. You know, I still had no idea really what I wanted to do, but so I managed to get into Napier in Edinburgh, and it was a professional studio photographer's course. Well, not necessarily studio photography, but rather than being an art-based course like they had in Glasgow Art School, it was a professional photographer's course. So I did a lot of
Was it more vocational?
Sorry, what do you mean?
So it was kind of it was designed to get you into work as opposed to being about the concepts and principles.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. So I mean, my peers were photojournalists or studio photographers or portraitists, and there was also the option of doing film and video. So in the late 80s, video was pretty basic. But it's funny, you know, the monkey video that you showed at the beginning of the interview. Now, I was just making that and sort of messing around. You know, I've got like suitcases full of masks and wigs and blah, blah, blah. And one morning I was really bored, so I made a little film of myself sort of jumping about with one of those monkey masks on in my underpants just for my own entertainment. And then on the same day, I had this interview on Radio 4 or something of a Scottish female filmmaker. And she was talking about a film that she had just directed in Hollywood. And I'm listening to it going, I recognise that voice. It turns out I went to college in Napier with this woman, Lynn Ramsey, who directed, we have to talk about Kevin, you know, she directed some pretty well-known movies. I went to college with her in Edinburgh. So while she's in Hollywood making movies, I'm jumping about my bedroom wearing a monkey mask and underpants.
We all go in our own artistic direction.
Oh, yeah.
So when you're in uni, is this when you start performing in terms of like, you know, outside of musical performing?
Well, so I went to uni when I was 19. And as I said, up to this point, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Yeah, I was studying photography, but it was just, I was following the line of get yourself an education, get a degree, get a job. Okay, this is something I can do. But I was really frustrated and doing really stupid things like getting drunk and like smashing bottles in the street and stuff like that. I didn't know where to sort of focus my energy. I had this real fear of the postgraduate promise of getting a job, getting a house, getting married, getting a kid, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to do this. So it was, yeah, just doing stupid stuff. So the turning point of the whole Lincoln story that you want to hear about is I'm walking through the park. It was either Glasgow or Edinburgh on a Sunday afternoon during festival time. It was probably Edinburgh actually, during August. And this really scruffy guy with dreadlocks comes up to me. And now, the thing is, you know, it's pretty commonplace, but in the 80s, no one in Scotland had dreadlocks. You know, they were called crusties or drongos or something, no? This guy comes up to me and says, oh, you want some free tickets to a circus matinee? And I go, oh, yeah, okay. Nothing better. So I was there with my girlfriend. So we went along to this circus. No idea, you know, just something to do on a Sunday. And it was Circus Archaos, the French punk circus. And my God, it blew my mind. It totally blew my mind. I had so if you don't know of this circus, you should look it up because it's still a landmark, I think, for French circus and new circus. There was no animals. It was all motorcycles and fire and explosions.
Am I correct in thinking that they were one of the main influence of New Circus? They were one of the driving forces that created the New Circus movement that the Soleil and all these people kind of capitalized on.
Yeah, no, they were. I think they were avant-garde. So it was very much rock and roll, and they had a band, it's a French rock band, and it was like maybe a heavy metal sort of style, and loads of fire and breathing, but loads of tableaus, little scenes of the circus performers actually acting together, as opposed to just turn after turn after turn after turn. So it was theatre with circus, and some of it was really grotesque. The point, there was nothing glittery about this circus. Of course, they had trapezes and contortionists and what have you, but the rest of the posse just looked like they were straight out of Borstal. And then all of a sudden, a motorcycle would come in and doing a wheelie and like ride over someone, and then there was a guy there with a chainsaw that was attached to a chain, and then it sort of it pulled in a rope on the machine of the chainsaw, and then he shot up into the sky, and then later on there was a dispute between the characters, and one of the characters got his head chopped off with the chainsaw, and there was blood, and I'm just watching this guy like an hour or something, and I thought, I want to do that. So it was bonkers, and also because they were very foreign, they were all French, and I'm going, wow, these people are from a different dimension, and also, as I explained earlier on, I was a real Europhile, so anything foreign, I was totally captivated. So they were there at the Edinburgh Festival for a couple of years, a couple of weeks, and I would go every day and just hang out, and it was the first time I came across people who were living in like old hippie buses and stuff like that. There was none of that sort of Carter's steam fare, really pretty vehicles and trailers. It was just they had old bangers and old vans and bonfires and stuff like this. And I hung out.
That would become known as the New Age kind of travelling scene.
Yeah, well, the thing was that, as I said, being in Scotland, the whole festival, sort of Glastonbury thing, and New Age travellers, I didn't know much about them. The only thing I knew about the New Age travellers was after the Battle of the Beanfield, where the cops beat up the convoy of travellers, I think 1985, there was a news story of, these troublesome hippies, they were causing trouble, so the boys in blue sorted them out, and look at these 3 baseball bats that we have recovered from their vehicles. They tried to use these sort of, I don't know, like a spade or a machete or an axe. Someone had an axe that they were chopping wood. Oh, these dangerous hippies had an axe. Whereas subsequently, when you see the documentaries of the Beanfield and the police brutality, it wasn't you see the truth of what it was, that these New Age travellers were cornered in a field, and then the police just went and smashed up the vehicles and dragged people out of the windscreens. That bad. So by 88 or 89, or when I first came across these people, to see people who actually lived in old buses, it was mind-boggling. Scotland's quite conservative culturally, so when I saw things like that, I was just, oh wow, this is amazing. How do I do this? I asked them, and so because I was there all the time, I got just hanging out, and one of them said, "Oh, there's this second show by Archaos." So that was the Bunax show, and there was a second show that Archaos had called Metal Clown. And they said, "Oh, go down to Manchester. They're holding auditions for this show." And basically, what Archaos was doing was they were getting free press by enrolling local kids to participate in the show, and to not get paid, basically. So I went down to this audition, and some of the people I'd been studying with had a house in Manchester, so I crashed out with them, and then we went for this audition. I had no idea what I was going to do. I mean,
Well, you know,
I used to do really stupid stuff to try and impress my mates. Like, you get pissed and you eat a can of dog food or something like that just to get some sort of reaction. And basically for the audition, I don't know how I came to this conclusion, but they said, right, we want you to go out there and impress us, to go do something. So I just poured a can of baked beans in my head, stripped naked and jumped about. And yeah, they said, okay, you can be part of the gang.
so you weren't shy then?
Sorry?
So you weren't shy?
No, you know, just
Were
I
you,
wasn't
were you,
shy.
were you nervous about it, or did you just throw yourself into it? Were you just game?
I just threw myself into it. I was so pent up with this frustration of not knowing what to do, that any excuse just to go bonkers and jump about. I mean, up until that point, the only real jumping about I did was sort of punk gigs and psychobilly gigs in the late 80s in Scotland. When you used to go to a concert like the Ramones, and the Barrowlands in Glasgow, it'd be full of people with leather jackets, and the smell of leather jackets was overpowering, with like 2,000 people there wearing black leather. And then as soon as the Ramones came on, the place just exploded. It almost felt like people were being thrown in the air. Just gone fucking crazy. So when I did that audition for Archaos, I just did that. I had the energy. I just needed the ignition to explode. And you know, when you're 18, 19, you've got so much fucking energy. You know, boom. So yeah, that's the beginning of the performing Macaulay.
So what happened to you after that? After the audition, do they take you back and sit and drink with you all night long, or do you go home and have days to think about it?
No. We had like 2 days or something to perform this show. So basically, the main part of the show, they knew what they were doing, and the circus would get these 10 volunteers or 10 kids from each town that they performed in, and then just showed them. They were basically extras, right? And then you just did it. You know, you turned up with robust clothes. You've got this piece of corrugated iron on your back, and the first thing we did was we'd go onto stage like a Roman. What do you call this? Is it like a turtle or something when you put all the shields together?
I can't remember the name, but yeah, it's a formation that they use.
Formation with all these lumps of corrugated iron on our back. So we sort of go in like this sort of strange animal, and then there's a fucking explosion, and we all fall all over the place because there's this guy that was doing the fireworks, and he really loved it. He'd stick all these bangers into a drain. As we went over, it was fucking noisy, and then we sort of fall down. Then this motorcycle was built onto stage, tie a rope onto my ankle, and then drag me off at high speed, dragged along the ground. And we just got, yeah, this is what we want. Do you know what I mean? And then just more explosions and what else? So then this show, it had the punk element, but also had it was all the story was about the conquistadors in Latin America and how places like Brazil are still totally screwed up between the rich and how the poor are super poor. And you've got this really salacious character on stilts who throws sweeties to the street urchins, who then become murderers because, like those kids I was talking about earlier on, just people with no escape, no plans, no way of making a living. So yeah, and then when they're doing a scene change, then us as the clowns, we do a couple of numbers to fill in the time for the next big number. So because I did the show, I did subsequent towns. I just followed them town after town, whereas they generally just pick up different people in each town. But they couldn't get rid of me. I was like shit in their shoe. I just sort of hung on there until the next show. And there's a couple of us that followed them and just got employed in every town that we went to. And so therefore we were given more and more parts to do, because they say go eat a dog shit, and we just not go and do it, maybe not literally, but whatever. So we do little numbers like two of us would approach each other on the stage, and we had a tennis racket each, and we do this really sort of stupid tennis game with like tubs of yogurt, because someone had found a pallet full of cartons of yogurt, so we just whacked them into the audience. Now normally when we struck the yogurt, it would explode and be this sort of but once my colleague he chucked this carton of yogurt at me, and whacked it, and the thing didn't explode, it just flew straight into the face of this woman, like 3 rows in, boom, and exploded in her face. Oh, God.
So it sounds like it was a dangerous proposition being an audience member in our chaos show.
Oh no, it was definitely, there was an element of something like that. You would expect to get maybe sprayed by diesel by a fire breather or something like this. But we had loads of little stories. It was so much fun, and I'm still friends with some of the guys that are that were in the troupe then. I don't know if you know Natty Bo.
The name
London singer, he sings ska, and he's a bit like Cab Calloway, he's a fantastic performer. So we did the show together, and so apart from the shows, there's loads of little funny things that would happen, like real genuine clown stuff, things that happen and you have to react to it. Not like when you do a clown course and everything seems a bit sort of fake, when you're actually in a situation where something goes shit badly wrong. For example, at the end of each show, the performers would go into the audience and sort of coax people down onto the stage, and we'd all sort of dance to the band for 15 minutes. That was the end of and I got up onto the bleachers, and I'm asking this woman, "Oh, come on down, the band's about to play." And she's going, "No, I don't want to come." And I had her by the arm like this, and I sort of gently pulled her. No, I don't want to come. I was like, "Come on!" And I pulled the sleeve off her coat. And I'm standing there with this sort of cylinder of coat in my hands. And so, like real clown stuff, you're just like that. Oh my God, what we're gonna do? What we're gonna do? Run away! So we had loads of stuff, and the thing was that because we were pretty low down, we were the scumbags of the circus. We were the gimps of this circus. When I first toured with them, I didn't even have a caravan or a van. I ended up like sleeping in the toilets, like midwinter. It was freezing. There was condensation coming down the walls, and I'm crashed out there with some others, just sleeping in the toilets. Then eventually we got a caravan that was in such bad condition that you'd be sitting there having something to eat, and you say, "Oh, could you pass me the salt?" And when the other guy reaches over for the salt, the caravan goes. Then you put the salt on the table and they go like. So, in a certain sense, we were living 24/7 as these clowns, and we had this sort of mad style of really ripped up leathers and all sorts of crap and sheep's heads and stuff like this hanging off it. Very Mad Max, which will lead me on to the next part of the story.
Yeah, I was going to say, so you toured around working for free, kind of using this opportunity that they took people in from each town to do the performance. There must have at some point then been a moment where they asked you to come on board to be part of the team, because you traveled to Europe with them, right?
Yeah, we traveled to Paris with them. So all in all, it's about 6 months I was with them. But it was very much like being a prospect. And the biker gang, you're always at the last of the queue to eat and stuff like this. But they were cool, do you know what I mean? But real rock and rollers, some of them were, real rock and rollers, and I think that was partly the reason for their demise in the end. That their lifestyles sort of became too problematic for the whole thing to continue, and it just imploded. You know, there's quite a bit of drugs going on.
No, I can imagine. Just a thing, just before we move on, about clowning and about how you say you do some workshops and you feel like it's fake. And when you were talking about that, there was something I thought that was there that isn't present in the other, and it's jeopardy, right? There's jeopardy inside your clowning in an Archaos show. Something might actually go wrong.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Do you think that has something to do with it?
Definitely. I mean, there's a certain. This is something that's really affected me throughout my life. Is that I can't really do corporate clean stuff. Nor I have done kids shows, but I'm really not that type. Just because there is jeopardy in what I do, and that's what drives it along. But also that can just be too much. You know, I've never been able to do nice shows. You know, and I admire people who can do it, and I'm quite envious that they can tone it down. But I've never been able to do that sort of thing, just because of maybe that desire for that same sensation. So when with your Archaos, it's real sort of, bring it on, yeah. I mean, it took me years to learn to talk into a microphone, you know, because I'd always been so excited I'd end up screaming into it just because I couldn't control that energy that I was emitting.
You were kind of surfing the wave of it as opposed to, you know, carefully channeling it down a canal.
Yeah. So yeah, the thing is with jeopardy, and the thing is, I think as a street performer, we're very good improvisers for things that go wrong. I'd say it's probably the best training for learning to improvise in that kind of situation. Because you do so many shows and there's so many random things that happen, that more so than you get in an indoor theatre space or whatever. How do you deal with that drunk? How do you deal with the child that cries right at your finale? What kind of solutions can you find to finish it well?
And if you do find those solutions, it's an opportunity for you to be a hero for everyone. Their good time is in jeopardy again, and you manage to lift that out and save it, you know, by what appears to be quick thinking in the moment.
Yeah, well, that you know, you've done it for long enough to know that as well. If I had people that were troublesome in the audience, I never tried to get into conflict with them, because I knew that regardless of the final, I would lose. You know, I just try and shift it on, or if I had someone that was heckling me, then use the power of the audience to get them to shut him up, rather than me appearing to be the bad guy or the control freak.
Yeah.
I mean, once in Edinburgh, in the festival, it was like a Wednesday, and every show that I'd seen on the street was being interrupted by a drongo, and I was going, "What the hell's going on here?" And then I realised it was probably gyro day.
Yeah.
And all the ne'er-do-wells had got their gyro in the morning and got pissed, and therefore wandered into the Royal Mile to cause trouble. So I had these guys that were really causing me trouble, and rather than turning around and going, "Oh, I'm trying to do a show here," and blah blah blah, I just said, "Let a man work." And it was really simple, and I hadn't had it planned, and I'd never used that line before, and it sunk in that I wasn't some fly-in hoity-toity artist. I was doing it because I needed the money and I was working, and it's finding solutions like that. But we've all got stories like this of just things that go awry, and how the hell do I manage to save face at the end of this?
Yeah. How do you come out of it everybody winning? If
Yeah.
you can, you know. So you just to get it back to chronology, because we've done an hour already, and I know you've got a lot of story to pack in. You go with Circus Archaos to France, And when you go there, what's your plan of the future? Is there one? Are you thinking about what's coming next?
No. We ended up in Paris, and shows were great. Do you know what I mean? It was bonkers. It was rock and roll. It was what I wanted. And then all of a sudden, it came to an end like that. It went bust.
Had you seen the writing on the wall with this, or?
Not really, not as quick as everybody else. I had rumors that it was struggling financially because it was a real big show. And as I said before, you know, there were certain elements amongst the cast that was imploding, and just, you know, business-wise, and the business partners of the creative side were, I don't know, it fell apart. And so I thought, what am I going to do next? I had to go back to London anyway, but that's where I met the Mutioids. The Mutioids would some of the Mutioid people would turn up at the shows, and they were very sort of similar style. Mad Max, you know, the
Post-punk, steampunk kind of thing, right?
Oh no, I wouldn't say steampunk is something completely different. This is from the new wave traveller scene, and people going to these free festivals and living in trucks and stuff. The Mutioids basically started as a bunch of people that went to festivals and then put on their own entertainment. And there's a documentary with Joe Rush, who was the founder of the Mutioids, that was on the BBC the other week there. And basically, it just explains that the 1970s and 80s Britain, it was dark. We already touched on the industrial problems of the country, and it was dark. And with the whole pop punk thing of making your own entertainment, and, you know, sort of DIY culture. So I was really keen to see what they were doing. The circus had gone bust, so some of these Mutioids said, "Well, we're coming to Berlin. We're gonna do a squat festival for the summer." And so I bought an old hippie bus, this old Bedford from 1970, that just about got me to Berlin.
How did you afford to get the hippie bus? Because you weren't getting paid working for Circus Archaos. You've not.
Oh no, I think with Archaos I was getting like 15 quid, you know, a week or something daft, and I was busking. So I managed to scrape together, you know, 500 quid of whatever it was to buy the bus, and it was an old furniture removal lorry. So I drove to Berlin, and the Mutioids this group had basically squatted a piece of no man's land. Now this is like 91. The Berlin Wall has gone down a year and a half before. So during that transition, the Russians were still in Berlin, but they were leaving. The Americans were still there. So when I arrived, you could still see American and Russian troops like driving around, and East Berlin was very much. I hadn't really recovered since the Second World War. All the buildings were still bullet strewn, and there's still buildings like the museums with big holes where a howitzer had blown a hole during the war. It was mental.
Was it? What were the people like? Because I assume a lot of people in the Eastern Bloc were part of communist USSR. You know, that they were part of the USSR. They were in a very different culture, and then bang, one day the wall goes, these two cultures mix. You were a year and a half after that. It's very early.
Also in Berlin, there was loads of Trabants that had driven from, I don't know, Poland and Russia, people trying to get to the West, no? So West Berlin was like West Germany, and East Berlin was, you know, concrete and really ugly. So the Mutioids they'd squatted this piece of land, no man's land, next to the Reichstag. It was like 200 yards or something from the Reichstag across the river. And this no man's land was it was like waste ground between two walls. And I guess it had been treated with chemicals to defoliate it for years. It was really fucking scummy. You cut your hand and it immediately became festered. But anyway, they set up an installation of of military scrap that the Russians were abandoning. So when the Russians were leaving, you could go to the markets there, and there was like pistols and crates of hand grenades and stuff like this that were being exchanged and for bottles of vodka. And I think those weapons are underground somewhere. You know, both the anarchists and the fascists were storing this stuff. But in a sort of industrial size, the Mutioids managed to get hold of half dozen East German armored tanks. Not the type with the caterpillar tracks, but the sort of 8 wheels, you know, the
people carrier kind of things.
people carrier, but you know, the gigantic vehicles. And they stole a couple of MiG-21 fighter planes from a training field in East Germany. Basically, these MiG fighters, which were from the 60s, I think, were used for training pilots or Russian fire crews or something. So one morning, I'm in this environment, this wasteland, where these tanks have been stolen or brought onto the yard, have been erected like Stonehenge. In fact, what they did was they welded 3 of these tanks together into a henge like that. So that's 3 tanks, and it was like 10 meters tall. And so I've just basically dragged them up. So these tanks are on the ground, and then with cables and like half a dozen old trucks, they pulled them up to sit like that, 10 meters off the ground. It was really incredible, because this is a bunch of punks doing this just for the sheer hell of it.
Well, so then there's no government funding behind this. There's no,
not at all. Not at all.
You said they did it just for the sheer fun of it. But surely it must have been something more than that driving to do this. It's a big undertaking.
No, it's just here's a great idea, let's do it. And the whole sort of punk ethos and free festival thing of, you know what, we're gonna have a party, who's got a sound system? I'll bring the sound system, I'll run a bar, and then at least we'll cover our costs, or we'll make the diesel money to get to the next destination. So these festivals are nothing like Glastonbury with all the sort of corporate advertising and bands playing, and you know, Grace Jones taking 100 grand for one performance sort of thing. It was just mental, you know. And Spiral Tribe turned up in their buses, and they put on their sounds. And
so you're there at this time, right? So early 90s culture in Britain. 2 of the big names, I think, from the kind of punky free party scene were Spiral Tribe and the Mutiod Waste Company. And you're there in Berlin, a year and a half after the fall of the Berlin Wall, with acquiesced Russian military equipment, with Spiral Tribe there and Mutiod Waste Company there. I mean, that sounds like an incredible experience.
Oh no, it was incredible. I mean, let's face it, there's a lot of testosterone there, so it didn't exactly dovetail perfectly.
Okay, how so? Do tell.
But yeah, it was just these situations with posses that would show up in their vans and just set something up and just take the space and do it. And because it was in no man's land, neither the East German police or the West German police knew whose jurisdiction we were in. But if you look online, you'll see photographs of all these tanks standing tail up, and the tank henge, and the fighter planes and stuff like that. It was truly bonkers. It was real Mad Max, and it's just like, I think I was just, during that whole period, I was just covered in diesel and fire smoke all the time.
Well, this is what I was going to ask: is what's your part in all of this? Where's your role in this this huge, amorphic, moving piece of work?
I just helped out, you know. First thing I did was I turned up there, and I met a mate of mine, Uri, and I said, well, it wasn't a mate at the time, but it was the first guy. I said, oh, can I join in? How can I help? And he said, well, here, take this spade. We're sticking up this fence. And that was it. We just chipped in. And at the end, you know, we passed the hat round, and people come and visit. We get them to chuck coins or something into the hat. And, you know, I go into the group kitchen. You know, I think we ate lentils for a year. But then there were shows there, but the shows were very sort of fire squatter type, you know, lots of industrial drumming and fire and flamethrowers made from fire extinguishers full of pressurized diesel. That's where I learned to blow smoke, blow fire. And there was other posses like the DNTT, who were another sort of large Archaos type of DIY circus of British travellers and German travellers all together. So it was very much a lot of the performing I did there was of that kind. Just large sound systems, very chaotic. There was no great theme,
choreography.
no narrative to it. Just people going bonkers.
And what's the community like? Are you guys meeting? Are you all together? All the people that visit that site during the time you're working there? Are you all meeting up in the evening and eating together?
Oh yeah. I mean, we were all there. We had like a village of vans and stuff, and there would be bonfires, and we just hang out around the bonfires, drinking beer or whatever every night. And the whole of East Berlin was a bit like that. You know, there was loads of squats and loads of bonfires and some real dodgy-looking punks at places like East Side Gallery, which was a massive squatted yard along the Spree, which was really dodgy. You know, heavy drugs were pretty prevalent, and a lot of these people were really fucked up. But it was mad. It was just, it was very apocalyptical.
Where did you see your place in the world at this time?
Well, I don't know what you mean artistically.
As you want to take it, you at that time looking around at the world, what do you think of the world and your place in it at that time?
I don't know. I was looking to do more shows, and the Mutioids really weren't into the shows. They liked showing up with the big trucks and the sculptures they did, but you know, the shows like Archaos, I really wanted to find another posse that was doing that, because I liked that you had that whole experience contained in an hour, you know, and things happened, and I think with the Archaos thing, you had like big things happen, and then you'd have like small anecdotal things that happen, but it's often the small anecdotal things that impressed me more. And I've often found this, you know, at circuses, that when I saw Zippos, for example, they had these 5 golden horses and Latin American acrobats and some gigantic trapeze. And what really impressed me was the ringmaster with his troop of little budgerigar birds that would like walk along a tightrope wire and drive a little car. I just going, wow, we're all watching this tiny little thing, you know, a bit like a flea circus on top of a table. That really subtle things are happening. And for me, I always found that more interesting than the big bombastic da 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 da.
So did you try and move towards doing that at that time then? Did you take a step away from the Mutioids and try and...
I did. I stayed in Italy for the next 7 years with the Mutioids, and we did shows. It was more like performance art, really. We did we toured all over Italy. We did gigs in Switzerland and Austria, and the Mutioid show was always like, you know, fire breathing vehicles or stuff like this. During that period, my pal Andy McFarlane and I, we developed these suits of armor that we found from motorcycle fairings and stuff like this, and we managed to make these costumes that looked like Transformers, you know. And the idea originally was we had these Transformer costumes made of plastic, and we played in a band together, played in a rockabilly band together. The idea was that we were going to play wearing these costumes. It was fucking impossible. Couldn't even see the instruments to play. So we ended up doing shows with the Mutioids with all these trucks and fire and stuff, and we would do these battles. So we made 6 costumes, and basically we just ran into each other with homemade weapons like toilet bowl cocks on a chain and whack each other. We'd have shields, and the plastic would essentially absorb all the impact. But it was a bit like, you know, in Mad Max 3 when they've got the Thunderdome. It was a bit like that, you know, like people blowing fire. Well, 6 of us would just run in and bash the fuck out of each other. And in fact, we did this show in the south of France in a skateboard park. And there's a sort of donut-shaped ring for the skateboarders. And we were going to, and this was with Spiral Tribe, and we're going to like go into the ring, and 6 of us would do battle in 3 pairs of 2. But unfortunately, there was one guy that was doing it. It was such a pain in the ass. He was sort of bullying the rest of us because he was a bit bigger than us. He was sort of pushing us around all afternoon, going, "Oh, we're going to see during this performance." So when it actually came to the time of the performance, when the 3 of us descended into this arena, and there's all the fire and the drummer, 6 of us were there to do battle in 3 pairs of 2, and without having pre-arranged this, 5 of us just turned immediately on the bully and kicked the fuck out of him.
And I take it he must have laughed about this, having set himself up all day.
No, he still refers to that as you in those fucking costumes.
Yeah,
the Mutioids, and then, you know, after 7 years with them in Italy, I found another group quite similar, but a totally different vibe, in Switzerland called ELXT90.
And so when you say quite similar but totally different vibe, was the vibe something you were trying to change at that time? Were you moving away from living with the Mutiod guys because you'd had enough of that world?
No, but because the other group was very similar. We lived in squats. We toured Europe in trucks doing sort of squat theatre, you know, good guys, bad guys. But the other group, there was more women in it for a start, because the Mutioids was very much sort of man's world with their girlfriends, if you know what I mean. There's a lot of testosterone and continual conflicts within that, you know. It's funny, you leave the straight world looking for utopia, and then you just find out that utopia's got the same social tropes. We just can't escape our humanity, so we end up having the same arguments as people that live in the high street. So with the group in Switzerland, ELXT90, because there was more women in it, the dynamic was different. So sort of less macho environment. And but it was interesting, do you know what I mean? So there was like 14 of us in this group touring, and it was a very sort of sci-fi group. I continued with the plastic transformer costumes, and I made a dinosaur that was attached to a vehicle. It was 5 meters long, 2 meters tall, and it was like a big Godzilla, fire-breathing Godzilla. And where was I? Oh yeah, the group was made of half of them were Swiss, a couple of French, a couple of Italians, a Brazilian, a Catalan, and myself. And the thing is, with the Swiss, when you work with the Swiss, even in the squatters, most of the squatters in Switzerland have got a trade. They're carpenters or the steel workers. They've actually done an apprenticeship. So when we were building stuff for the shows, they'd say, "Oh, it will be ready on Tuesday at 6 o'clock," and it would be ready on Tuesday at 6 o'clock. They were and really well made. You're talking about my welding earlier on, my welding's terrible, and I was always really embarrassed that I might have artistic flair for designing stuff, but like sticking it together, constructing, I was pretty bad.
That's what you described as that. You said I do artistic welding.
Yeah, I do artistic welding. So the dynamic of this group was pretty interesting, because the Swiss, they're very dry. Yeah, lovely folk, but you know, they're very dry and they're very precise and they get things done. But it would have been a pretty dry show if it had been left to them. The French, oh my God, they're such nutters. You know, any excuse for a punch up and they're there. The Italians and the Brazilians, they're very sort of fun, easy going, you know. And I think my contribution was just that, you know, the thing is with British culture and the punk culture, it was something that led, and the other European countries sort of followed the British lead as far as the punk and the squatting thing, the style went. So I guess that was my contribution, you know, culturally. So I toured with them for 3 years, and then we decided to call it a day.
Why
which time,
call it a day? If you're having good times, why not do it forever?
I think we just saw that, cracks were starting to appear. When you're traveling with 14 people and everyone's skint and you're living in the same vans, and it can be tiring. And we started to bicker and what have you. So we just decided before it got too bad to split. And besides which, after 11 years of doing gang shows, I really fancied doing, something different. So I decided to go study. I went to study theatre in Barcelona for 4 years. Well, 2 years, and then I thought I was wondering what to do, and I found this Lecoq course in Barcelona. The thing is with these big squatting shows is that I guess we've all got different reasons for being there, and some people are there just for the road trip, and other people are there because they like building stuff. And I was, I started to find it a wee bit frustrating that I thought, well, these shows are all right, but dramatically, they don't have much nuance. And what I was saying about Archaos, they have like big stuff, but it's like the tiny little stories that I found really interesting, and that's what I wanted to explore. That.
And so going and studying, I suppose, is a really, really good way to take your understanding you've developed and put it into a framework of knowledge that's collected over generations, which is what you.
Yeah, but it's not about learning it through someone else's experience. You have to sort of go through all these experiments. So that the first year of that Lecoq course was really interesting because it was very much the basic of, imagine you're a fire and how does that fire burn at different levels. So it's about learning to modify your own projection so that you weren't constantly shouting. You could also whisper and talk, and it's really, really interesting. And then the second year was more sort of the genres of theatre, clowning and buffoon and melodrama and that sort of stuff. And what I discovered was I always liked the idea of the clown, but I found it really difficult because Scottish people were not. Clowning's more like you've got to reveal a bit of yourself, your natural self, for good or bad. You reveal it, and you show that you are a human. You're not a character. You're showing yourself for good or bad. And buffoon is very cynical. It's someone that uses comedy to express their cynicism. So for a Scotsman, that was a lot easier. So it took me a long time to work out what a clown was. And no matter how many of these courses I went to, I really struggled with the concept of what a clown was. And perhaps my understanding of it is going to be different from someone else's.
But when you say understand, do you mean that on an intuitive and emotional level as well as a conceptual and academic level?
Yeah, I found a lot of courses. Oh, Jesus, I was like, oh, God. Yeah. I'm going to have to break you to make you. I'm like, you can't do this because these clown courses that you go and they sort of force you to fail, and this is the sensation of failure. I'm going, I hate this. I'm doing it because I want to laugh. I want to have fun, and I'm not going to mention the teacher.
But we all know who you're talking about.
Yeah. And it got to the point I went to Edinburgh to do a show, and everybody else had put on their flyer, taught by so and so, to qualify their show. And I was so sick of it. I put in my flyers, wasn't taught by so and so. But what I discovered was I was doing these courses, and I fucking hated it. I hated feeling shit.
And this is after Lecoq.
This is after Lecoq, but it's been a long time to understand it. And the one clown teacher that really showed me how to do it is Angela De Castro, who teaches in London. And I did a 3-week course with her, and I was almost tripping. I felt like I was I was having these abstract thoughts, and it really brought it through of what I should be feeling, because a lot of these details in these courses are they're abstract. But at least in her course, I had a laugh. I was enjoying myself, and it wasn't, I wasn't always feeling shit because I was always failing and trying too hard. And the harder you try, the worse you feel. So I would recommend, for anyone that wants to feel that sensation, then go do one of her courses. And since then, yeah, boom, I'm in this trip land. So when I do my shows, I'm like tripping, and then you look for those little things that you can play with the audience, because you know all the business that you have to do and the gags. But then if you just go through your repertoire, that's what it feels like. Whereas when you know that inside out, and then you've got the opportunity to mess with someone that's got curly hair. And also, it took me a long time to drop the cruelty in what I'm doing, because with their chaos, their sense of humor is quite cruel. And subsequently, the Mutioids and stuff, it's very sort of heavy metal, flesh and bone, and quite aggressive. So it took me a long time to understand different levels of beauty, and to drop that machismo, because the machismo was in the way of me really relaxing, because I was constantly trying to, I don't know, subliminally saving face. I can't do that because I'll look like an arse. And but when I learned to look like an arse and just relax with it, even with the big bean and the naked jumping up and down for Archaos, I was buzzing with the energy. I didn't feel like an arse. But
then you were being huge and big and kind of extraordinary, as you might have felt at the time. Why would you feel like an arse doing that? But then if you were asked to do something which your character at the time would not have found big and interesting, then maybe you felt like an arse.
Well, I guess it's also to do with vanity. Do you know what I mean? And no matter what you do as an artist, but if you're a young man and you want to look cool and you want to snog someone, you don't want to look like a dick. So all of that sort of stuff was standing in my way. It's only when I got beyond that I took less care about my appearance or whatever.
And by the way, I know it's not, because you went to many courses and schools and you did a lot of experience before. But it sounds miraculous the way you describe it, that you went to go and study under this lady and then suddenly, bang, the problem's gone. You understood intuitively how to be a clown. Was it that? Was it miraculous?
I don't know. There was a point when I started losing confidence in what I was doing. I played in a band, right? And we're really popular, and people traveled to go and see this band. And then I sort of lost confidence to the point that I'd put the audience out of focus, and I could only just see a blur of lights and stuff, because I brought down this internal mask to sort of like the visor of a knight's helmet. And
why do you think you were doing that? What made you do that? Because you didn't have the knight's visor, or perhaps the knight's visor was the baked beans, but it didn't seem like they were there.
I don't know. I guess once I got over the initial buzz, I became quite self-conscious.
Were you worried about what people would think about you, or was it just more of a feeling of anxiety and dread, or
a bit of that? A bit of anxiety, and I was in my early 20s and not having full, I'd have moments of paranoia and just sort of loss of confidence. Whereas with De Castro, one of the things that she did was sustained eye-to-eye contact. Now, you go to other courses and say, you've always got to keep eye contact with your audience. But if you're face-to-face with someone for a long time, and that's part of what she does, you're sort of nose to nose with your partner for 10 minutes or something. There's nowhere to hide. Yeah. you're looking into someone's face and there is nowhere to hide. And once you get beyond that point, then
This sounds like therapy.
As a performer, you know, if you're doing stuff and then you're making a proposition, but you stop short, and you think, "Oh, I don't want to reveal that thing about myself. I'd rather keep that a wee bit secret." But then, once that someone can actually see what's in your head, and I guess this is what the whole clown thing is, there's nowhere to hide. There's no reason to be embarrassed either. Yeah, we're all humans, and we've all got flaws, and we're all stinky and spotty and what have you. But and I just found that, you know, with these other clown courses, for example, they were telling me to make eye contact for the wrong reason. They were telling me to make contact, make sure that your gag has registered with your audience, which is true. Do you know what I mean? It's a dialogue. You make a proposition, you look at your audience, and you make sure that they've understood before you move on, rather than just carrying on blindly.
Is that
Otherwise,
it's a mechanical concern, right?
Yeah. Whereas what I'm describing here is dropping the shield and allowing people to see inside and just going, you know what, I don't give a fuck, this is me. And then performing becomes so much easier, especially in that environment.
But when you perform, you do a show called The Man of 1,000 Farces. You do multiple different characters. They're not all of you, are they? They're different characters.
And there is an element of me in all of those characters, because I mean, there's a lot of dick jokes in it. Right? In fact, I asked this woman to come and watch the show, and she goes, "Oh yes, it was good, but you know, as a feminist, I don't like the dick jokes." I'm going, "But you're not seeing the point. I'm not using the dick joke as a weapon of mastery over some other gender. I'm showing it as this fucking thing that has controlled most of the errors in my life. You know, the amount of trouble I've got into with my dick. Oh my God, there's times when I just wanted to punch myself continually in the crotch and say, would you not just fucking stop? Stop making me do these stupid things." And that's in The Man of 1,000 Farces. Yeah, a lot of it is truthful. Do you know what I mean? The working with the status that I pretend I have, and then showing that I'm actually a fucking idiot. Because, you know, like status and bling, you know, when someone puts on so much gold jewelry, and they think, oh wow, I look like a person of importance, and everyone thinks you look kind of vulgar and cheap. No,
yeah,
and we all do that in a sense. Eh?
Because there's a pretense to it. You're doing it because you want to appear like this, not that you are this.
Yeah. So I mean, the 1,000 Farces. Yeah, these are all a facet of myself. So it could be a man of 1,000 facets, no?
So we need to still even get to the formation of that show. So you've found your clown. What do you do once you've found your clown?
Well, I did a lot of cabaret. So a lot of the material on that 1,000 Farces show is like 20 golden greats, you know? The best of. And I just worked on material with the cabaret and sort of stuck it together. So the 1,000 Farces is just basically turning up with a couple of suitcases full of gear and having a soundtrack and struggling to get from one sketch to the next sketch, which involves masks and false teeth and what have you. But everything that I find personally entertaining, going, my God, this is so stupid, I'll put into the show. And hopefully someone else will find it. And up to this point, it's a really silly show. But I've also tried to make contrast in it.
Can we focus just for now on the formation? So when you say you're working cabaret, are you working cabaret in London?
Yeah. So
what's the scene? Maybe, what are you working?
At the moment, I have no idea. Well, after lockdown.
Then what was the scene then? When you started working cabaret after doing the school and the courses, what was the scene you were occupying then?
It was just one of those sort of things. I started doing some sort of squat parties, and then someone said, "Oh, you want to? There's this gig. You want a gig?" And I go, "Oh yeah, I'll do it." And then from that gig, it led on to many other gigs. So there was a period when I was doing a lot of cabaret.
And
Most of it was sort of,
little short pieces, like 5-10 minutes.
yeah, sort of 5 minute pieces, and most of it was what do you call it? Cod magic. Just because magic is, you've got this thing, you've got to do this trick. It's easy enough to carry to a gig, and there's plenty of space for it to go wrong, there being the magic. And if you've ever been to Blackpool Magic Convention, you see it all there, you know, these people arriving with gigantic status and then things going wrong. And you go, wow, that's beautiful. You know? So that was the premise for a lot of the cabaret stuff that I did. As I said beforehand, because cabaret in London, you know, your audiences are loud and drunk, so therefore subtle things, I didn't find it was a great space for subtlety. So I tried to do that with the Thousand Farces when I sort of held stage for an hour. They gave me the opportunity to do those little things.
How do you go from doing the 5-10 minutes to doing the full hour show and, you know, having your own venue?
Just worked on a lot of little sketches, put them together and tried them out. But I've been doing it, you know, from studying, it's like 15 years or something. So maybe 10 of that was doing cabaret and then working on sketches. And then Man of a Thousand Farces was 4 years ago. So maybe, let's say 6 years of putting material together and then just sticking it all together, because up until I did the Edinburgh Fringe, I had no idea what I was going to do. I had a slot. I had a couple of cases of random crap and a whole bunch of random sketches, and not really knowing what I was going to do. It was only after doing the run in Edinburgh that it started coming together. So the first couple of shows were really sort of ramshackle.
So this is Free Fringe, right?
Yeah.
So Free Fringe, just very quickly, if someone doesn't know, is set up at the Edinburgh Fringe. You get a venue. You don't pay anything for the venue. You can charge people on the way out, or you can ask for donation on the way out, and the venue keeps the bar.
Yeah.
So you go for your first run. Do you get people through the door in the first run? Because that's usually.
Well, I mean, I was at CC Bloom's, which is a gay club. So basically, a lot of the people that came to see my show were just there for something else. You know, they're waiting for the club to open or something. The whole flyering in Edinburgh, oh my God, what a disaster. You know, you got 1,000 people there trying to hand out flyers to everyone that's already exhausted from, and the amount of wasted paper and cut down trees is quite depressing. So I haven't been back since, and I thought, well, if I was going back, rather than handing out a flyer, I'd rather go out with sandwich boards and just stop people at 4 at a time, do them something quick and tell them to take a photograph of the sandwich board to try and get some other form of engagement, because, you know, at least they've taken an action. They've done something. Maybe that will stick in their mind a little bit longer than receiving a piece of paper that gets cast off 30 yards along the street.
And then half the rainforest has to be cut down for that thing to get.
That stuff is so ineffective. I think it's such a waste. It never worked for me, at least.
And so you didn't get many people in the door, but you say you did form the show. You did start.
Oh, yeah, I think I did. I'd get like 15 people per night, which by all accounts is meant to be pretty good, or, you know, above average for a fringe show.
I was surprised when you said 15. I thought, oh, you're doing okay then. 15 a night's not bad.
It may have even been 16, Matt.
Wow. Plenty of envious people in Edinburgh during August for those numbers.
Yeah. There I am, the man who broke the bank of Monte Carlo.
So the thing I'm interested in with this is, you said that you figured out what the show was. So what were when you first went to perform it, did it not work properly? Did it not have a sense of flow and narrative? It wasn't a finished piece of work, so to speak.
No, but I'd sort of based it on a sort of street show. Okay, what's going to be what's the beginning and what's the end, and how do these other elements fit in that, you know, like the knots in a string. And that's essentially how I put the shows together. So I'd leave, you know, good start, good finale, something good in the middle, and then the sort of lesser numbers in between the middle and the beginning and the end. Do you know what I mean?
I'm surprised you worked it like that, because I thought it'd be quite difficult to do it like that, having all these different characters, these different 5, 6, 7-minute bits to sew together.
Well, what transpired was the chaos of me trying to juggle all of these things ended up being part of a success. You know, in the way like the guy with the spinning plates on the sticks. No one cares that he gets all the plates on the sticks. What we want to see is this guy struggle to prevent them from falling and smashing. No, it's the struggle that makes it interesting.
The word we used earlier on again, jeopardy.
Yeah. So, so watching me get sweating blood, trying to find props that I can't find, or whatever. So I knew I had a couple of good surprises, because the thing is with the theatre school in Barcelona, when we're doing buffoon, he said, make sure that whatever your character is, it comes out and it's got a couple of tricks up its sleeve. There's always a surprise there. So I tried to just make sure there was plenty of surprises in there, and that as it developed, I figured out, okay, let's mix the rough with the smooth, because a lot of what I do is quite grotesque. I mean, it's bloody and it's got lots of dicks in it. But if I could put in something really nice, like something really horrific happens, and then I do a shadow puppet show, and people go, "Oh, isn't that nice?" And then the next minute, I've chopped off my arm and I'm spraying the audience with blood. So therefore, there's a sort of stalagmite, contrast. And incidentally, the shadow puppet show I learned to do on the road when I was living in the van. I didn't have electricity. I just had a torch. So I just spent winter nights just entertaining myself, really. And that, that's how a lot of things develop. When you have to make your own entertainment. No.
When you're forced to think in a slightly different way than people do with having everything at their fingertips. One of the things that interests me with this is that you didn't know what you had at the beginning of the show. And by the process of applying your work into this new shape, the thing that the show was tied together by became apparent to you.
Yeah, but it was something I hadn't calculated for. But it was the sweat and the struggle of just putting this stuff together live. But on the street, you're very conscious of when you've lost someone's attention. So for the people who don't know this, you've got to constantly watch your audience doing a street show, and as soon as you see them start to wander, then you have to change tack. You have to do something different. You can't continue just keep going on in the same rhythm. So it was very much like that, and I just learned to eliminate. So I did have all these sort of building bricks. I just didn't know what final form it was going to look like.
But I like the fact you were open to allowing the manufacture of that show to become part of the show itself. The rough edges between the elements, the ingredients, became part of the whole, which I think is very cool. Did the show in the end become more successful? Did you start getting more people turn up to the end and run by the end?
I think the show has been successful. A couple of times I've sold out, but I think that's probably as much to do with place and time as opposed to people come specifically to see me. They're just coming to see something. I think it's a good show, and I haven't done it for a while. And at the moment, I'm in no mad rush to do it. I'd like to do it so I don't forget how to do it. But the whole fringe thing I found really stressful.
Was that the flyering and trying to get people through the door?
Yeah, and the constant self-promotion and the disappointment and the stress, and just like, fuck this. I'm meant to be enjoying myself doing this, and I'm just getting stressed out. So I do it occasionally for when I want to do it. And also at the moment, because I'm working as a massage therapist, I've got an income other than performing.
Was this since lockdown? Were you a full-time?
Yeah, this is since lockdown. I started going to massage school and started getting all these different qualifications And at the moment, I'm working pretty regularly doing this. But it allows me time to think of things artistically for their own merit, as opposed to designing something
You
because it
became
makes
a painter, right, as well during lockdown. Am I correct in thinking that?
yeah. So basically, I started painting before lockdown, like the September before lockdown, because I was doing a street show, an escape show with straitjacket and chains, and one of my volunteers knocked me off my feet and I smacked my head on the ground, and I ended up getting taken away in an ambulance. And well, the security were washing my blood away with a bucket of water. And the most interesting thing about street shows in that sense is you hear the performer bombastically promising a dangerous stunt, like we all do. This is going to be a dangerous stunt. And the most dangerous thing you can do in a street show is use a member of the public as a volunteer, because you never know what the hell they're going to do. And the amount of people I know that have been dropped for supposedly having their weight supported, going onto a tightrope or something like that, and some fucker just lets them drop. So I started painting just because I couldn't do shows. For 2 months, I was in real bad pain. So I just started doing watercolors, and then just started painting. Then lockdown, paint, to the point that in December I did a solo show. Unfortunately, no one could come, but I had all these paintings in portfolio cases. I'd paint them and put them away. And it was only when someone asked me to put up a couple of pictures in her show, and I ended up putting up 30 paintings. I was going, fucking hell, I've had a busy year. I was constantly at it.
And were you doing that with the ambition of, well, if I can't perform, maybe I'll do this? Or was it just...
Yeah, I was looking for the next thing. Yeah, but it was a lot of self-promotion as well. And I think the self-promotion for me started getting really boring. Just look at me, I'm good, buy this, buy that. So for the time being, doing something else, earning a crust, and then having the freedom to just go, you know what, I'm going to do this just because I want to do this, and I'm not relying upon bums and seats or anything like that. So I was just going to say that, you know, I don't need to have a artistic outlet. I took up skating, and I'll just go skate for the sheer hell of it. I'm not doing it for a performance. I'm not doing it for an audience. I'm not doing it to pass the hat. And that's the thing, when you're performing full time, all your energy is going into developing stuff that you can possibly earn with. No.
Yeah, and do you find that you enjoy those things a bit less because there's this kind of end goal? You're not just playing and experimenting and learning something. You've got your eye on the prize at the end of it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that was the thing with the Thousand Farces and Edinburgh. I did 21 nights on the trot. I was also doing street shows. So the street shows was actually paying for my stay in Edinburgh. So over 3 weeks, I did 50 shows. And I was exhausted, and I don't want to do that again, because I will burn out and I will hate the material. I will resent doing the material because I feel like I'm obliged to do it.
It's become a drudgery.
It's become a drudgery. So I think with the things that you really love, you know, you've got to be gentle with them. Don't overstrain them, and stop doing it to allow it to breathe.
And do you see yourself going back to it in the future when COVID settled down and the world's more
street shows or
street shows, do you see yourself going back on the street again?
No, I don't think so. I think you've got to be. You need a lot of vitality for doing the street. It's hard work. It's really hard work, and also because the territory is changing and there's more problems with the council about noise and stuff like this, and like a lousy summer like we're having just now, that not knowing is, you know, a friend of mine said, oh, we're getting a job with security. I'm not doing it for security. I just don't want to think about money. I just want to turn up and do it, and the bills are paid. Whereas with the street show, there's all that stress of turning up and waiting to see if you get a show and what's going to happen. Is it going to rain? Saturday, I'm not going to get. Oh, yeah. Besides which, because of the escape show that I was doing, it was pretty generic, and I just couldn't think for the life of me of a new angle for it.
See, that always surprised me, was that you have really creative, interesting stage work, and then when you come to be a street performer, you don't seem to take the creativity and the passion and apply it in the same way for the street show. Is that unfair to say?
No, it's not unfair to say. I think I just got caught into a trap of not having the time to develop something different. I had to be there every week just to pay the bills. And then I'd go home and I didn't have the energy to consider something different. And, you know, to invent something new, you've really got to withdraw yourself. Well, I do. I need to withdraw myself and do something different. I always found that, you know, if I went and did a shit job, like working in a supermarket or something, because I was sick of what I was doing, it only took me a couple of weeks of earning crap money, doing a job I hated, to see the light again.
Yeah.
But I needed to have that withdrawal. Yeah, I needed to step out and then just and do something else without, you know. And I think when you're constantly doing street shows, there's not the space. It's
I think it's twofold, isn't it? Because it's not just constantly doing street shows, but it's constantly doing street shows where you have to have a certain outcome at the end of the show.
Yeah.
You have to earn money because you've got to pay rent, you've got to feed yourself. And that's where the joy, I think, gets bled out of it, because you go, well, I can't experiment with this for a day, and earn £5 and discover what would come out of it, because I've got to pay the rent.
Yeah, but you know, on the street show, I did do other shows as well, and I did experiment with different stunts. It just I sort of ran out of energy, actually, and as you said, oh God, I just need to make money, and there's no space here to experiment. And I don't know what it was like in the 80s. It sounds like there might have been space to experiment. But
I think in the 80s you had a lot more squats, you had a lot more understanding or accessible benefit system, and you had lots of space. So I think all those elements gave people more time to develop, I think. I'm not sure, but that's the impression I've got from doing all the interviews. Do you see yourself going back to doing farces, doing A Man of 1,000 Farces?
Oh no, I'll definitely do the farces. I thought about going to Edinburgh to do a couple of turns this year, but because I've got this barge and it needs to be done, and and actually I'd like to spend a wee bit of just summer holiday time with my son, just, you know. And that's another thing about the street shows, you're constantly working during school holidays.
You work when everyone else has their time off, but that's the life of entertainers, surely, altogether.
Yeah. So the farces will be coming to a venue near you pretty soon. I'm not sure when. At the moment, I've got this other stuff in my life I've got to sort out. I've got to get this bloody boat in the water, and until I get that, I can't really relax to do the other stuff. Essentially, that's it.
Well, I will say this: once it's in the water, you'll relax about it being in the water. You won't be relaxed about it being in the water. You'll have different worries. On a boat, I used to leave the boat, and every single second I left the boat, I was thinking, "Has it sunk? Has it sunk? Has it sunk?" You'll get a good year of that. So
yeah.
So there's two questions. Believe it or not, we're reaching the end of the interview now. This is the last 10 minutes.
Right.
We've gone for an hour and 50 minutes, which has been incredibly interesting, I have to say. Fascinating. I always ask the same two questions at the end of the interview. And so the first one is, if anyone was going to go about having a life similar to yours, to go work in circuses, traveling performance groups, work on the street, work in cabaret, is there any advice you'd give people who might want to do something similar to what you've done in your life?
Give it a go. Why not? You know, just make sure that you cover the basics. And unfortunately, like you just said a couple of minutes ago, the 80s London was different, and staying in London is an expensive place to stay as an artist. You know, it doesn't leave a lot of space to experiment. But you know, yeah, why not? Go hang out the places you'd like to perform. Like I found the circus. I thought I went there every night for a fortnight and just thought, I want to do this. And you just have to jump in with both feet. And if there's something that captivates you, that interests you, then hang about, make a pain in the arse of yourself until they let you do it.
And is there any advice you have for penetrating groups? Make you sound like an undercover agent. You've gone and hung around with people who have done things you want to be involved in, and it seems like in your life they've allowed you to be involved. Is there anything you can say about that?
I think with any group, if you turn up and your services are free and you help that machine roll along, the doors are always going to be open. You know, everyone, you know, every show needs a prospect. You know, depending on who this advice is aimed at, you know, but for young folk, do you know what I mean? It's just go, look, watch. Don't make a pain in the ass of yourself. I'm speaking from personal experience here. And just see what you can absorb. And then if you see something that inspires you, then ask questions. How did I do that? Where did I do that? And back to the story about the saxophone, I think I would have been a far better musician if I had the courage to go jamming with people. You really have to jam. You know, just learning by yourself is really tough. You know, if you no matter what you're doing, if you can just jam with other people, then it gives you a bit more confidence and a bit more experience.
Helps you to be more intuitive, right?
Yeah, and it's a tough road, you know, and especially if you're young and you're gung ho, and you know maybe you're covering up for insecurity, being arrogant. You know, it's maybe not the best way. You know, maybe your progress would be a bit better if you're a wee bit modest.
But I don't think, you know, either of us when we were young might have not been that modest either. I think modesty is gained through experience.
Well, yeah, and black eyes, I think.
Yes. Black eyes, broken noses, and broken legs.
Yeah. I've always thought that what we're doing is passing the baton, right? So when I was in Italy, I played in this rockabilly band, and I was inspired in the 80s by bands like King Kurt. Right, I don't know if you know this band. It's sort of a psychobilly, rockabilly band, and they used to like cover people with buckets of porridge and things like this. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. I want to do this. So I went to Italy. I lived there for 7 years, and I set up my own version of something similar. And so when that came to an end, I thought, okay, cool. And then subsequently, I met people who went to our concerts. They started their own band, and then people watched their band and started their own band. So you know, to be part of that process of just passing the baton. What else? Well, that's probably the best thing you do. You're part of the perpetuation of that culture.
You have a legacy. You've just described to me one portion of your legacies. You made this band. People saw this. They made their band. And it's that ripple effect, the butterfly effect, the waves on a puddle resonating out.
So I was in Italy a year and a half ago. And people referred to this band I was in and how it affected them. And I thought, well, great. As you say, it's a legacy. But it's also just, you know, there comes a certain point where you have to move, you have to step out of the limelight, and it's someone else's turn.
Yeah, don't be that guy.
Eh?
I said, yeah, don't be that guy.
No, yeah, you have to do this. And I think culturally, this is really important. Do you know what I mean? So I look at some of my peers, and some of them have gone on to do something sort of really good commercial stuff, right? It was never for me. I was never that guy. I could never operate in those situations. I think I'm quite proud of what I've done in the sense that I think it's good. I put my passion into it. There's quality in it, and if it inspires someone else, then the whole thing continues. You know, I
totally agree. I think it's a very, very important thing. One of the most important reasons we create culture is that it carries the thoughts, worries, and messages on to the generations ahead of us. You've met a lot of people in your life, Johnny. You'll be honest with you, from what you've described, you hang out with all the people that when I was a young man I thought were the coolest people on the planet. You know, the people who were like the Mutioids and Spiral Tribe, part of this big new age movement that was around in the late 80s, early 90s. You performed with some of the most exciting circuses around at that era as well. You've met incredible people on your journey. Is there anything you want to say to those people if in years to come they stumble upon this video and they watch it and they get to hear a message from you?
I'd say thanks very much for the opportunity. Some of those experiences were quite rocky, but there's no one from my past, no matter how bad the relationship was, there's no one that we continue grinding an axe. We go, all right, how's it going? Yeah. So any problems we had in the past, long gone. And yeah, thanks for the experience, I guess.
Okay, cool. Well, John, thanks for your time, mate. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and I've obviously, you know, as hopefully you get from the things I've said, found it fascinating hearing the stories of things that I'd only heard whispers and myth about as a young man. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your experiences and your knowledge. I think it will be really valuable to people in the future that look at it. Everyone who's been watching, the guys, thank you for watching. John, is there anything else you want to say?
I've still got some of these T-shirts left. I think I've got like maybe 5 of them left.
URL will be in the doobly-doo.
Yeah, listen.
Right.
One continuation, and thanks very much.
Hey, my pleasure. Anytime. Everybody, thanks again, and I'll catch you soon. Have a good one, everyone.